Welcome to the week 3. Week 3 is based on legal and regulatory framework of export and import. Today is lecture 1 of week 3 in which we are going to talk about Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act. This is an important regulation through which we will try to understand its linkage with export and import in Indian context. Before we start with the journey, let us go through the contents of today's lecture. We will start with introduction and historical background of the Act, followed by objectives and key definitions that are mentioned in the Act. We will after that talk about the powers of central government and role of Directorate General of Foreign Trade. After that, we will talk about Importer Exporter Code, that is IEC, followed by Export and Import Policy Framework. After that, we will focus on licensing, restrictions, and penalties, followed by amendments and institutional structure. Consequently, we will also talk about the World Trade Organization alignment and the global context of the Act, as well as challenges and certain case examples. Finally, we will conclude by discussing the best practices. At the outset, the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act 1992 is India's primary legislation governing export and import. It provides the legal framework for formulating, regulating, and promoting foreign trade. The Act replaced the Imports and Exports Control Act of 1947, modernizing the trade governance in India. This act enables the government to facilitate exports, regulate imports, and align trade policies with global commitments. What is the historical background of this act? In the pre 1991 trade regime, we all know that the regime was very restrictive and highly regulated under the 1947 Act of Export Import Controls. Economic liberalization came in 1991, which necessitated a more flexible and facilitative trade framework. This act was launched in 1992. This act was enacted in 1992 to boost exports, ease licensing, and promote international competitiveness. The act marked a shift from control oriented policies to development and facilitation focused trade governance. Let us now try to understand the objectives and the need of the Act. The objectives of the Act include facilitation of sustainable growth of the foreign trade and integration of India with the global economy. The another objective is to simplify procedures and reduce bureaucratic hurdles in export import operations. This act also has an objective to promote exports and ensure an efficient regulatory environment for international trade. Not only this, another objective of the Act is to safeguard national interest, ensure compliance with international obligations, and regulate sensitive imports. The objectives include to enable the government to implement strategic trade policies and respond to global trade dynamics. Dear students, every act has certain definitions which are the backbone. Let us now try to understand some of the key definitions used under this act. Import, according to the act, is bringing goods into India from a foreign country. Export, according to Act, is taking goods out of India to a place outside India. Importer or exporter is any person engaged in import or export activity. DGFT is Directorate General of Foreign Trade, which is the apex body administering the Act. Importer Exporter Code is a mandatory registration number for all trade participants. These definitions establish the legal foundation for trade operations under Indian law. Let us now try to understand the powers of central government under this act. Central government is empowered to formulate and announce foreign trade policy to regulate, promote and facilitate trade. Central government can prohibit, restrict or regulate imports and exports in the public interest. Central government may amend or revise policies as per changing international trade conditions. Central government can also prescribe conditions for export of strategic, hazardous or restricted items. Central government ensures that foreign trade aligns with economic, environmental and security considerations. Dear students, let us try to appreciate and understand the role of Directorate General of Foreign Trade. The Directorate General of Foreign Trade, shortly known as DGFT, functions under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. DGFT is responsible for implementing the foreign trade policy and issuing trade related authorizations. The key functions of DGFT include issuing importer exporter codes, granting licenses, permits, and quotas, monitoring export promotion schemes and incentives, as well as coordinating with export promotion councils, customs, and international trade bodies. DGFT also serves as a bridge between the government and the trading community. Let us try to understand Importer Exporter Code IEC. Importer Exporter Code is mandatory for all importers and exporters in India. It is a 10-digit code issued by DGFT. Once IEC is issued, it remains valid for the lifetime of the entity. IEC ensures transparency, accountability, and traceability in foreign trade. Without importer exporter code, no firm can legally undertake import or export operations in India. Let us now try to focus on export and import policy under this Act. The Act empowers the government to notify and revise the foreign trade policy periodically. Foreign trade policy lays down the framework for promoting exports and managing imports. It includes provisions on incentives, market access, trade facilitation, and compliance. Export and import policy under Foreign Trade Act also supports diversification of markets, high value exports, and integration into global value chain. Foreign trade policy acts as a roadmap for achieving India's trade and economic objectives. Licensing and restrictions are also an important ingredient. Certain goods require licenses or permits for import export under specific conditions. The categories may include prohibited items, restricted items, and canalized items. Prohibited items are those in which trade is completely banned, for example, narcotics, hazardous waste, etc. Restricted items require prior approval or license of the government, and canalized items are only designated agencies that can import or export, for example, petroleum, fertilizers, etc. Licensing ensures compliance with safety, environmental, and strategic concerns. Licensing and restrictions also helps India meet its international treaty obligations. What are the different offenses and penalties under this act? Under the Foreign Trade Act, non-compliance is punishable. Non-compliance with provisions of the Foreign Trade Act can result in suspension or cancellation of IEC, imposition of monetary penalties, seizure of goods, and revocation of licenses, as well as prosecution for severe violations, for example, illegal exports, trade of restricted items, etc. The DGFT has powers to conduct inquiries and impose penalties to maintain trade discipline. What are the different amendments and updates in the Foreign Trade Act? The Foreign Trade Act was amended in 2010 to include electronic governance and enhance DGFT's powers. The Act's focus on digital trade facilitation, online licensing, and paperless documentation has provided much update to the Act. Recent foreign trade policies between 2015-2023 emphasize ease of doing business, MSME, that is medium and small medium enterprises support, and global value chain integration. New initiatives like digital authorizations, electronic bank realization certification, and trade analytics portal improve transparency and speed. Under the amendments and updates, continuous updates has ensured alignment with World Trade Organization and adoption of global best practices. Let us try to understand the role of institutional framework in this act. We have Ministry of Commerce and Industry, which has an overall policy formulation role and which takes strategic decisions. The second institution is DGFT, that is Directorate General of Foreign Trade, which takes into consideration policy implementation, authorizations, and monitoring. The third institution is Customs Department, whose role is enforcement at ports and compliance with import-export laws. The fourth institution is the Export Promotion Council. Their role is in terms of market development and exporter support. And finally, we have Exim Bank and ECGC, that is providing financing and risk mitigation. Thus, coordination among these institutions ensures smooth trade operations and policy effectiveness. Let us now talk about the World Trade Organization compatibility under the Foreign Trade Act and the global context of the Act. The Foreign Trade Act in India ensures India's trade regime is compatible with World Trade Organization agreements. It also aligns domestic policies with GATT, TRIMS, and subsidy related provisions. This act prevents trade disputes and enhances India's credibility in global trade negotiation. WTO compatibility in terms of the act enables India to participate actively in multilateral and bilateral trade frameworks. The Foreign Trade Act of India also strengthens India's position in trade remedy cases and anti dumping investigation. What are the challenges ahead and what are the certain points of criticism. In terms of Foreign Trade Act of India, the bureaucratic delays and procedural complexities still exist in some areas and sectors. There is overlapping jurisdiction among certain agencies which can cause compliance hurdles. Frequent policy changes create uncertainty for exporters and importers, and they should be ready to understand the spillover effects of those changes. Small and medium enterprises often face challenges in navigating regulatory and documentation requirements. There is an emerging need for greater digitization, capacity building, and policy simplification. Let us take a case example implementation of this act into action. With the use of this act, export of dual use technology products is regulated under the act to prevent misuse. Directorate General of Foreign Trade ensures compliance with international export control regimes like Wassenaar Agreement. Similarly, licensing procedures for sensitive goods balance trade promotion with national security. This example demonstrates how the Act facilitates trade while safeguarding strategic interests. What are the best practices for exporters in the light of this Foreign Trade Act? The first is to maintain updated knowledge of foreign trade policy and DGFT, that is Directorate General of Foreign Trade Notification. Another best practice for exporter is to obtain and renew IEC and other authorizations promptly. The export the exporters should ensure strict compliance with licensing and documentation requirements. Not only this, the exporters should engage with export promotion councils and DGFT help desk for guidance and policy support. Additionally, exporters should invest in digital tools and automation to streamline compliance and reporting. Dear students, let us now conclude our today's lecture. We have discussed in length about the Foreign Trade Act, also about the foreign trade policy within the act and the institution that supports this particular act. Foreign Trade Act is the backbone of India's export-import regulation framework. We have understood that it has evolved from a control mechanism to a facilitation oriented, growth focused policy tool. We have also highlighted that the Act empowers government and industry to navigate complex global trade challenges. Not only this, for exporters, understanding this legal framework is critical for success and compliance. And finally, with continuous reforms and digitalization, the Act will remain central to India's trade ambitions. Dear students, thank you very much for this particular lecture and being there with me.